In 1785, the Acadians traveled up the St. John River looking for a new home. They arrived in St. David, where they saw the beauty of the area, the tall stands of pine and fir trees, the fertile flatlands along the river, and the St. John River itself, with its clear blue water, made it very attractive to settle here. At the same time, there were the French along the St. Lawrence River that were moving south and had discovered the beauty of the St. John River Valley. Then a third group, the Scot-Irish people in New Brunswick, moved further up the St. John River and settled in what is now the town of Allagash. All of these groups were so thankful that they had found the St. John Valley and soon started to build churches to practice their religions. This video is about the Catholic churches that exist in the St. John Valley, starting in the town of Allagash and going through to the church in Hamlin. You will see each Catholic church along the way. Most of the history presented in this video is from the book of Stars and Steeples, written by Father Jacques Lapointe, published in 2014. This is St. Paul's Church in Allagash. St. Paul's Mission of Allagash was first served by the pastor of St. Charles. During the summer and on occasions in the winter months, the pastor would travel to Allagash, and services were held in some of the homes, in a schoolhouse, and at times even in the lumber camps. In September 1929, Reverend Roderick Menard, newly appointed pastor of St. Charles Parish, initiated the building of a chapel in Allagash called St. Paul's Mission. The chapel and rectory were constructed by donations of rough lumber, free sawing, and free labor by the members of the mission. The work was completed and the chapel was dedicated by Bishop Murray in the summer of 1929. This is St. Charles Borromeo Church in St. Francis, Maine. In 1871, the Portland Diocese took charge of the American side of this mission, and Father Charles Swaddle, pastor of St. Luce, built the Chapel of St. Charles. In 1875, the church became a mission of Fort Kent until 1882. In 1883, the chapel was lengthened by 14 feet. Reverend Father Book started the first records in January 4, 1891. The present modern church was dedicated on May 24, 1981 by Father Albert Roux. The parish merged with the parish of St. John in 2002 and is also responsible for St. Paul's Mission in Allagash Plantation. In 2014, all of these church sites are now part of the parish of St. John Vianney in Cluster 1 of the Diocese of Portland. This is St. John the Evangelist Church in St. John Plantation. Prior to 1909, St. John Plantation did not have a church. Mass was celebrated in the store of Mr. Solomon Albert. St. John Parish was established as a mission of St. Charles and St. Francis in 1909. Father G.A. Forrest, 1909 to 1920, resided as pastor at St. Charles, was apparently instrumental in building the St. John Church. The church was built in 1909 to 1910. The St. John Church Cemetery was blessed in 1910. The church today does not have regular services. Occasionally there is a sacrament performed. This is St. Joseph's Church in Soldier Pond, Maine. In Soldier Pond and adjoining Wallagrass area, there are two church buildings. These were less than 2 miles apart. The first, called St. Joseph's Church, was built in 1890 under the direction of Father Joseph Marcoux and was located in the town of Wallagrass. In 1923, and under the direction of Father Maxime Pomerleau, a store belonging to T.T. Michaud, located in Soldier Pond, was purchased and converted into the second church called Sacred Heart Church. With small populations in both communities, supporting and maintaining two church buildings became difficult. In 1994, under the tenure of Father Michael Seavey, the aging church building in Wallagrass was demolished and an expansion and remodeling of the Sacred Heart Church in Soldier Pond was added. The name of the Soldier Pond Church was changed from Sacred Heart to St. Joseph's Church. Today, this church is part of the St. John Vianney Parish. This is St. Mary's Church in Eagle Lake. Reverend Joseph Marcoux, pastor of Wallagrass, was given the assignment of beginning a church in Eagle Lake in 1906. In 1907, Eagle Lake became a parish by itself, and in 1908, the church was completed. There were 278 families living in the parish. Most of the lumber was a gift from the mills. In 1918, an epidemic of the Spanish flu hit this community and many parts of the valley. Father Marcoux was himself a victim of this terrible epidemic. The new church was built in 1971 and holds 353 persons. This is St. Louis Church in Fort Kent. St. Louis Church was set up for French-speaking Catholics. The first church was erected in 1864. Some of the old wood was used in the new church. The current building was erected in 1911 and is the largest church building in the St. John Valley. The stained glass windows were created shortly after World War II, and they highlight the Jewish roots of the Christian faith. This is St. Louis Church in Frenchville. In 1826, the first church of St. Louis was built under Jean-Élie Sirois, pastor of Saint-Basile in New Brunswick. It was originally named Saint-Émile. At least two of his churches were destroyed by fire before the present one opened in 1908 and was renovated in 1993. The neighboring cemetery includes tombstones with old French names. Women's maiden names were often found used on their tombstones. This is the Christian Life Center in Frenchville. In 1970, the Pastoral Council of the Diocese of Portland decided that Christian formation centers were an important part of reaching out to Catholics within the diocese. The Christian Life Center was formerly the convent of the Sisters of the Holy Rosary. This is St. Agatha Church in St. Agatha, Maine. St. Agatha was organized as a parish upon receiving Bishop James Healy's blessings to separate from St. Luce of Frenchville in 1889. He named the new parish to honor St. Agathe, a 3rd century Sicilian saint who suffered martyrdom. The first parish mass was celebrated by Father Ernest Etneau, who was originally from St. Martin, France. This first Mass was celebrated at the home of Elzéar Michaud on December 8, 1889. Father Etneau then directed the construction of the first parish church and rectory at the head of Long Lake. In 1940, the church was destroyed by fire, and reconstruction of the current church began immediately. This church was completed in 1941 and was blessed and dedicated by the Most Reverend Joseph E. McCarthy, Bishop of Portland. The resident pastor at the time was Reverend Émile Robitaille. Today, the St. Agatha Church is part of Our Lady of the Valley Parish. This is St. Michael Chapel in Long Lake. In 1950, summer resident Levit Rassignol of Madawaska purchased an old storage building across the road from his summer home. With the help of local residents, it was converted into a summer chapel. The chapel was named to honor Rossignol's deceased sister, who had adopted the name Sister Michael upon her entry into the convent. Because of the increased church attendance by the camping community, a new chapel was rebuilt on land donated by Louis Pelletier. The chapel reopened August 13, 1967, and was blessed by Bishop Daniel Feeney. The chapel is used from the end of May to early September. This is St. Joseph's Church in Sinclair. St. Joseph's was established in 1936 with Father Wilfrid Soucy. The second pastor, Father Zenon Charette, was known as a wood craftsman. The rectory and church reflect his fine craftsmanship. The bell was paid for through a special collection which brought in a surprisingly substantial check from a summer parishioner, Cecil Lebrun of Van Buren. His parents operated the Long Lake Inn in 1941. He informed the pastor that when he was a prisoner of war in Japan, he had made a promise that if he survived, he would give a charitable amount to the first small church that needed it. He was one of the only 2 people of the group to survive the prison camp. His chaplain had told him that he survived because of his intense faith and sense of humor. This is St. Thomas Aquinas Church in Madawaska. The arrival of the Fraser paper mill in 1925 increased the population of Madawaska. In order to address the growing size of the congregation, Father decided to say Masses in a local movie theater upstairs in the small complex. Bishop Murray, with Father Wilfrid Willett, established St. Thomas Aquinas Church in 1929. The first floor was the church, and on the second floor there were 8 classrooms. The direction of the school was turned over to the Daughters of Wisdom. This is St. David Church in Madawaska. Established in 1871, it was canonically approved by David Bacon, the first bishop of the Diocese of Portland. The church was named in his honor, and St. David, Bishop of Wales, became its patron saint. The present church was built in 1911. Some refer to it as the Angelic Church due to its depiction of 60 or so angels throughout the church. In 1973, the church was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as the Acadia landing site. The Tante Blanche Museum, located next to the church, is highly respected. In 1926, the first stained glass window was installed. The stained glass window tells the story of Ave Maria. This is St. Gerard in Grand Isle. In 1930, during the lean years of the Depression, Reverend Albert Charette established the newly founded parish of St. Gerard. Local population at the time was 150 families. Father Charette built the church. The pews were constructed of full pieces of wood without joints and still remain in the same condition today. Father Charette also supervised the construction of the school, rectory, and convent for the parish. The old rectory has been restored and is the home of the Greater Grand Isle Historical Society. This is Mitzpah Chapel in Grand Isle. Mitzpah is a Hebrew word which means to help another. This special place of retreat, prayer, and reflection is situated in the pastoral back settlements of Grand Isle. A St. Dominic rosary made of cedar wood and weighing 500 pounds floats in a reflecting pond. A way of the cross is on a pathway through the wooded area. A cancer survivor wall stretches 36 feet long and commemorates past and present cancer survivors. There are many other devotional and prayer-filled sites. This is a memorial to the first Mont Carmel chapel next to the rest area in Grand Isle. It could have been constructed as early as 1847. Local oral tradition tells us that in the woods in back of the small chapel, one could find a spring of healing water. This is Notre-Dame du Mont Carmel Church. It is now le Musée Culturel du Mont Carmel in Lille. The church was a French classic church built in 1910 by Leonid Gagné and designed by Théophile Daoust. The inside is an ancient Roman interior. The outside is Baroque with twin domed belfries and 7-foot trumpeting angels carved by Louis Jobin of Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré, Quebec. The angels are carved in pine and covered in hammered zinc. The church closed in 1977 and is now a museum. One of the most diverse and extensive collection of Acadian and Quebecois artifacts and furniture in the United States is housed in the church. This is St. Bruno's Church in Van Buren. In 1826, St. Bruno was the mission church to be built on what was to become the future American side of the St. John Valley. It is believed that St. Luce was the first official church after St. Basile. St. Bruno had permission to build the first church site in Grande Rivière. In 1991, St. Remy in Keegan merged with St. Bruno. Eventually, St. Rose Chapel in Van Buren Cove on Long Lake, serving during the summer, closed. Stained glass windows of the multicolored panel depict the life of the Blessed Virgin Mary, as well as primary parish saints such as St. Bruno, St. Peter Chanel, St. John Vianney, and St. Pius X. St. Bruno Cemetery is one of the valley's oldest and is a treasure for genealogists. This is Notre Dame de l'Assomption Chapel, located in the Acadian village in Van Buren. This chapel was built by the Van Buren Knights of Columbus. It is made of hand-hewn square logs. The Acadian village is one of the largest historical sites in Maine. A roadside cross. It was common in the St. John Valley for Acadian settlers to raise a cross near groups of homes. This was a place where Acadians would gather, share news, and pray. This cross is called the Acadian Village Cross, but was formerly known as the Violet Settlement Cross. The cross is dedicated to all the Acadians that settled in the St. John Valley. This is St. Joseph's Church in Hamlin. It began as a mission chapel and was completed by Father Etienne Actuad in 1887. The name was chosen to honor Joseph Duby, who generously donated the 2-acre site. The first Mass was performed August 14, 1887. The first church burnt in 1950, but was rebuilt the same year. Although small and humble in stature, it is filled with the Holy Spirit, especially at Sunday morning Mass and the Masses during the planting and harvesting of the crops.